Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Max and Leo with the Bellingham Real Estate Company, and today we're getting together to talk about a topic that's been on every real estate broker's mind for about the last month, the NAR settlement.
Boom, here we go.
Leo, this is a topic we've been discussing a lot over the last month and beyond. What are some of the top ideas that you think are important to discuss related to this topic?
You know, we need to be looking at what, and potential buyers and sellers need to be looking at what is going to happen in the future. And I think one of the key principles or key ideas that we've been talking about is that there's a broad spectrum of service, expertise, knowledge base, managing broker versus non-managing broker. Working with somebody that has seen it all, has seen every contract, has had proper training. A lot of people get into the business and think they're a salesperson, but really they are a contract person, and they should be incredibly knowledgeable on contracts because, it could be the difference of a really great situation, making the most amount of money on your condo or your house, or it could be the difference between losing money, getting into a lawsuit. I mean, there's just these little nuances that I think a lot of people don't see and are very nuanced between each broker. Every broker has a different level of skills and knowledge and experience in the industry.
Right on, and they'll all negotiate this differently.
Absolutely, and I think a big indicator of that is up front when you're meeting with somebody. Do they immediately, when you're talking about compensation and what they charge, do they immediately cave, or do they know how to project their value and show you why they charge what they charge? And I think it's kind of a saying that I've heard a long time throughout the industry is that if somebody is immediately willing to give up their compensation for what their service is, what are they going to do when they are put to the fire to negotiate for you on your behalf? Like, what does that look like?
Right.
That's always my question to that. So anyways. Okay, so Max, another one of those core principles that we've been talking about with the NAR settlement is around consumer protection and consumer transparency around the fees that are charged for real estate services. Now, this is super tricky because on one hand, how can we give the consumer the most transparency around this is how this works, it's negotiable, this is what I charge personally, and having these one-on-one conversations. From a federal perspective, we're not allowed to discuss this publicly, right? So there's a lot of nuances to these. Is it like it's a one-on-one conversation? It's case by case. What should people know about how to navigate these conversations going forward?
I think the biggest thing to know is that when you're meeting with your real estate agent, you can have those discussions, and you should, and ask any questions you need to feel that it's all being brought to the surface, but that conversation should be very transparent, and you should walk away with that having a good understanding of how that compensation works.
Absolutely, and we're actually really lucky in the state of Washington, specifically with the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, because they've leapt ahead of this to lay everything out in brokerage services agreements and listing agreements so that conversation is really already on paper.
Yeah, right. It's a good guideline to go through that conversation with, and I'm fortunate that we're in a state that is so ahead of the curve.
And it's important to note also that a lot of what you're reading and a lot of what you're seeing on these clickbait YouTube videos and Instagram reels is from a national level, and most multiple listing services are not like the Northwest Multiple Listing Service and have not leapt ahead of this.
Right.
So we're very fortunate here in Washington State. So I would also add that it's important to, remember that, yes, this is a national level issue, but there are nuances to each MLS, each state, each local level too. So we're lucky.
We're lucky.
Yeah.
With this being such a topic of conversation lately, a lot of people are wondering if this could have some impact on home prices potentially going down. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously it's another clickbait topic on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I don't go on there, but it's out there. And what I would do is I would ask the question: if you're the seller and you're not obligated to pay a commission, it's negotiable, and you have the ability to not charge that, are you going to then reduce the price of your home, or are you going to price it based on market comparables and make whatever the number is percentage more as a seller? I think we like to think that we're all humanitarians and we're all going to drop the price, but when push comes to shove, I wouldn't do that. If I didn't have to pay that other commission, which I don't have to offer that, I'm going to look at what's best for my family, and what's best for my family is to make another X amount of dollars on the sale of my house. So that perception that it's going to drop prices, we like to think that that's what's going to happen, but very realistically, it's all based on comparable data. It's not based on comparable data minus the fact that their net proceeds changed, right?
Yeah, and over the last few years, we've seen a lot of variation in interest rates, but home prices have remained relatively stable.
Absolutely, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the local versus the national conversation. Obviously, I can't speak to what home prices are like in Atlanta, but I know that in Whatcom County, we've seen a very steady growth, even with interest rates going incredibly high. So it's just another variable that gets added into it that, we're in a very insulated market that has seen steady growth.
All right, Leo, let's talk about buyers. Buyers might be out there seeing this news and wondering what this means for them. What are you actually seeing out there?
Yeah, I think back to, in December, the Northwest MLS came out with an update on the brokerage services agreement, which really outlines what the buyer's options are in the event that, we as let's say you're the buyer, and what I charge is X percent, and we get to the situation where a seller is not offering that. Well, this brokerage service agreement, which is fantastic, outlines what your options are. Does the seller have to do we request that the seller increases to match that? If there's more than that, does that amount go to the brokerage and pay the agent more than whatever their minimum is or whatever they charge? Or do you have to pay out of pocket? If we get to that situation, my job is to be a deal maker. It's all outlined up front, but it's pretty uncommon for it to actually, come to the light. So anyways, have this conversation up front, outline it in the brokerage service agreement, look at all the options, because you have more than one option on how that can get handled, and then discuss that with your broker and ultimately ask them how they would handle it. But I think there shouldn't be any fear around that, but there will ultimately be situations where the seller's not willing to increase commission, they're not willing to do anything differently, and you'll have to make a decision as a buyer as to how you're going to handle that. And that might mean you don't get to buy that house. So all of these options are very real, but that's why a buyer consultation and really just going through disclosures, brokerage service agreements, the buying process, that's why I'd rather spend an hour or even 2 hours in the consultation so that someone really understands that versus getting to that point and going, oh yeah, about that.
Right.
This is that situation that I said might never happen. So I think it's important to have that conversation up front.
Right on, I agree. At the end of the day, this is a service industry, and we want you to be comfortable and confident in the professionals you're working with.
So for Max and I, it's incredibly important that as you get into the home buying process, we've spent the time so that you feel confident and comfortable with us as a professional when it comes to competently negotiating, but ultimately you feel educated that when these scenarios pop up, we've already talked about it, and now it's in action. We know exactly what your options are, and you can act, effectively to move forward.
All of this is in context to helping you buy or sell a home, and at the end of the day, that's what we're here for.